Guys, super stoked to have you here. You're coming from Austin, Texas. Thanks for your time. So for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, identify yourselves. Who's Jake? Who's Jordan? Who's Jim?
Yeah, so I'm Jimmy. I'm the oldest brother. I'm standing here in the middle.
Okay, Jimmy.
Jake, I'm the middle brother over here on the right-hand side, maybe left for you.
Got
Hey
it.
guys, I am Jordan, the youngest brother here.
Okay. So before we get into kind of the whole story about super coffee, by the way, which is exceptional. And before I knew I was doing this, I've had the product. I love it.
Thanks, Mark.
So it's cool. It was cool to hear that you're coming on this show. But where did you guys grow up? And talk a little bit about your formative years, what the influence of your parents were on you, and also the relationship you guys had together as brothers.
For sure, man. So we grew up in Kingston, New York, in the Hudson Valley, just 2 hours north of New York City. We're super close in age. Today, I'm 29, Jake's 28, Jordan's 26. And Our parents had us at a young age. They had 3 kids by the time they were 25. Mom and dad were both Division I athletes, and they got into parenthood probably before they were ready to. And we always say they figured it out. Their background as athletes really prepared them to raise us with the right values of teamwork, being compassionate to those who are on your team, hustling through the line, sort of putting in the work that other people on the team aren't willing to put in. And we played all sports growing up. Our mom and our dad were oftentimes our coaches. Really? And the 3 of us, we would, if we weren't playing one-on-one in the backyard, we were often on the same teams growing up as well. So we built a pretty strong chemistry throughout our childhood as athletes. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that was due to the push and pull from mom and dad.
Yeah. So what was off the playing field in the house? What was the environment like? Your mom and dad disciplinarians, or were they pretty free? I mean, do you guys get along? Or did you beat the shit out of each other? Or what was that like?
Didn't fight too much. We competed a lot. There was always a game of one-on-one or something going on. I would say that they allowed us to make mistakes. My mom had a saying that she would sit us down and draw the line of like what was acceptable and show you where you were coming on that line of your behavior. And she would use the analogy of you're getting too close to the bad side of the line. Which was great because you had to make the decision, right, of how do I get back to the right place on that line, right, or on the right side. But they were, to Jim's point, they were young parents, and they really forced us to follow our dreams with something, but believe in ourselves. I think was always something that our mother did. She was the type of mom that she would write a quote on the board. Well before I think that became like mainstream in social media. There was always a quote of the week on the board. She would always tell us kick today's ass when she dropped us off even at elementary school. So I think the ideas of believing in yourself and starting your day with intention setting was something that she intentionally did and accidentally did, because it wasn't as overt as be super intentional with what you're about to do, but go into the day optimistic and be prepared to be kind and compassionate to others, but also be ready to compete and win the day.
Oh, that's cool. So what about your dad? It sounds like your mom was quite a force. What was he like?
Yeah, I think Dad was also a force in his own right. He was a Division I linebacker, so he instilled that competitive spirit early on. And one thing he always told us, whether it be on the football field, baseball field, or basketball court, was be first in everything that you do. If you get a water break, sprint over to the water cooler.
Cool.
And he was also a physical engineer, so he really cared about education as well. And his classic quotes helping us during homework after school was measure twice, cut once. And he really wanted to make sure we focused on the details and did the little things right. Unfortunately, he had suffered a few injuries playing college football, a lot of concussions that led to some mental disabilities for us growing up, and that certainly impeded our childhood for sure. It was not easy. They tried to understand what was wrong. It was really post-concussive disorder. Ultimately, that had an impact on his life, and even so, he powered through that to be the best father that he could be, and it showed us, look, like things are not always going to go perfectly or as planned, right? That was not the life that he'd planned or our mom had planned with him, and but he powered through that. He was always there at all of our games and pushed us to be better. So he was a great father for us as well.
He's not dead. Jordan's talking like he's dead. He's still alive and well.
Jim's out there. Yeah, he's out there.
That's amazing. But you know what? A lot of people play football and even special operators. I was a Navy SEAL. You probably know that. You know, deal with TBI or concussions. Have you guys gotten? Are you all football players? I know at least one of you was. Jimmy, you played, right?
Yeah, Jake and I played football. Jordan was basketball, and
Okay.
I mean, we've never had, thank God, no, we've never been knocked out or any severe concussions. But I mean, playing football for 10 or 12 years growing up, every play you're hitting heads with somebody.
That's right.
And it's those little hits that add up.
They're finding, the same thing with the SEALs. Like I haven't had a knockout concussion in the SEALs, but every time I shot a weapon, every time I blew something up, every time I parachute jumped, there was a micro trauma to the brain. And so now they're recommending that all SEALs, active and actually getting out, do some sort of therapy it's more preventative maintenance so that when you get into your 60s or 70s, you don't have the, pre-onset of Parkinson's or neurological disorders that come with TBI. So something like every time this kind of comes up, I like to put it out there. So anyone who played football at the level you guys played in college or professional should get a brain scan and do some electrostim therapy or something like that, just as preventative maintenance.
Yeah, 100%.
Food for thought, guys.
Definitely.
Thanks, man.
So your parents weren't entrepreneurs. You went to college probably. I know, Jimmy, you went to Wall Street. You probably weren't thinking you were going to be business founders, entrepreneurs. So what was that like? Like going from, thinking you're going to be, probably making money on Wall Street or climbing the corporate ladder to suddenly, you're just basically looking at this tabula rasa every day and trying to figure shit out.
Yeah, man. And you and I share a similar experience. We both went to Colgate University,
right.
and not much had changed from the time that you graduated till I did. Like the expectation was to get into finance or to real estate and make a lot of money. And
yeah.
Right. And for me, like I just did that because that was status quo. That wasn't what I was personally passionate about. And we didn't know, Colgate's a liberal arts school. They didn't really have an entrepreneurship program. So I didn't know what a startup was. I didn't know what a pitch deck was or anything like that. I knew that Jordan created something that he was excited about. He was still a student athlete at the time, and it was a better for you coffee to get him through his practices and his study sessions. And that was exciting. When he's passionate about something, it excites me. And it was more of solving a problem with my brothers rather than starting a business. None of us have business backgrounds or business degrees. But I think
that's not true. I do.
Okay.
But no, I think the key, the lessons learned as athletes are a lot, sort of empower us to do what we do on a daily basis in terms of overcoming obstacles.
Yeah. Now I can see how they transfer to entrepreneurship, just like a lot of the special operations or the warrior athletes principles, that are somewhat similar, transfer to entrepreneurship pretty well. But of course, there's way more than that involved, and I want to get into that. But let's talk a little bit about the origin story of Super Coffee, Jordan. I mean, what was that like? Like, how did that come about? And let's, kind of put us into your mind about how you created the whole formulation.
Yeah, we've always been interested. Funny enough, back to our family roots, our uncle was a successful entrepreneur. So not directly, our parents, but in the family. And growing up, we'd do lemonade stands and we'd sell gum and do things like that. So I always had an itch for entrepreneurship. And when I got to campus my freshman year, we would have 5 a.m. basketball practices, which I loved. But what I didn't love was going to 8 a.m. class right after that.
Right.
And I was pretty health conscious at the time, not as much as we are now 6 years ago as a freshman. But I would not drink Red Bull, Monster, Starbucks, Frappuccinos with 40 grams of sugar. But unfortunately, that's all my school had to offer.
Right.
And when I saw that, I was like, hey, I'm not going to drink this stuff. So I started making my own. I'd wake up a little bit earlier at about 4:30, start making my own pre-made cold brew coffee with protein, just from the protein that they provided because I didn't have any money.
So you just like mix in protein powder into the coffee?
Yeah, that's how I was starting it. I was like, this is great pre-practice.
Yeah,
I can also take it with me to class. And it worked. It was great. I was like, why isn't this available? I couldn't find it anywhere. And it was awesome. But what I realized too was like, hey, we have a really demanding lifestyle here. We have 5 a.m. practices. Then we have class all day long. In between, we got to figure out a way to lift or come back and get shots up. We got to stay sharp. Then we're going to go out and party, and then we're going to do it all over again, right?
Of course, the partying part's really important.
Yeah, exactly. But it was demanding, and what I realized was, look, what we put into our body is what we get out of it. And the fact that we don't have any healthy options is a travesty, especially on college campuses. So I put together a business case proposal because I was studying management, but again, I was only a couple months in. And it was focused on food and beverage and why aren't there healthier options? And at the same time, I was tinkering with formulas in my dorm room as if I was a R&D scientist, and I was using my teammates to give me feedback on the product. So I was doing some of the foundational things that any business founder would do unintentionally. I was just doing them because, to Jim's point, I was passionate about this project. And about 6 months into the year, I called Jake, who was at Georgetown at the time. And I said, hey, man, I'm really excited about this potential coffee project. It's a healthy, better for you option. My teammates finally love it. I'm drinking it all the time. It gets you jacked up, makes you feel great. Do you want to maybe start this with me and work on it this summer? And Jake was like, hey, absolutely. There's a program that we can pitch in, a Georgetown summer launch program, if you want to drive down and compete. And again, this just comes back to us being athletes and competitors. I said, hell yeah, I don't have a business plan, but let's do it. So that week I basically drove down from Philly to Georgetown, and we pitched. And from there, I'll pass the mic to Jake to talk about next steps.
Yeah, cool. I think it's interesting too, because, putting protein into your coffee wasn't novel, right? Every one of our teammates probably was getting a nice coffee after their morning lifts and mixing their protein shake that you got forced on you as you left the weight room by your strength coach, or they were drinking it side by side with your Starbucks or whatever it was. But I think that action, taking action was our very first step as entrepreneurs. And I do think that correlated directly back to what Jim mentioned about our parents probably being running our household like it was a startup, having 3 kids before 25. But then, we started always testing the product on our teammates, which was the best focus group we could ever have because we were making a product for ourselves.
When you were doing that, were you packaging it yourself, or were you just how did you get it to your teammates? I'm just curious what this looked like in the early days, and you're mixing this shit in your dorm room, and are you giving it to your teammates? You're giving it to them in a bowl or something?
No, I would actually slurp
this up.
Recycled naked juice bottles.
Yeah, and I would call suppliers. It's some local plastics company and say, hey, I'm starting a company. Could you send me some samples? And they would send bottles of 15, 20 at a time. So I'd keep them under my bed, pull them out, fill them up on Sundays, and then have enough inventory for the week.
Oh, that's interesting. Cool.
Our first ever transaction, though, Mark, it's a great question. Jim was working on Wall Street, and his boss found out that his 2 little brothers had a coffee startup. He's like, oh, we love coffee. Everyone in the office loves coffee. So we made a case for Jim. We sent it up, and he paid us for it. But that got there, and it was all recycled bottles that we had used. So the label on the top of the plastic bottle was clearly not sealed. And his boss threw it away. He threw it away. He's like, no one's drinking this shit and getting sick from your bro. I didn't realize it was this janky. So that's literally the state that we were at. But that was the first time anyone had paid us for the product.
I love that. That's awesome. No one's drinking this shit. Yeah, but you got a first transaction, though. That's cool.
Totally. Yeah. And that was the story of the way that we got in. Our first customer was Whole Foods Market. Right. We walked off campus. There was one half a mile from Georgetown. And it was great because they had just started accepting the Georgetown dining dollars that summer. So we walked up with a horrible looking bottle that, again, was a recycled Honest Tea bottle this time. We printed out a label in the business school. Jordan brewed up a batch in the dorm room blender. And we walked to the store manager, literally walked in the front door, said, we make coffee. Here it is. Do you want some? And the guy was definitely questioning it. He was like, this doesn't look great. But our pitch was hey, you guys accept the Georgetown dining dollars. Worst case scenario, he told us we could do a demo, which we didn't know what it was, but just demonstrate the product in the store. We're like, worst case scenario, we'll get some football players to come up and eat at your hot bar, right? And you'll make 20, 30 bucks. And that was our in. That was how we got into Whole Foods, got set up as a local supplier. And then 12 weeks later, we came back with product. We went to the back door where he told us that's where we had to drop it off. And we were he scanned our purchase order, and they were like, hey, this purchase order is not real. And we're like, no, Mark set it up. It's real. This is it. And we went up and saw the guy. His name wasn't Mark. What the hell was his name? Derek. And we were like, what, Derek, what's up with this purchase order? And he's like, the guy in the back saying it doesn't work. He's like, yeah, that's because it expired. When I put in a purchase order on Tuesday, you bring it on Thursday. You don't wait 12 weeks. You don't wait 12 weeks to bring it. But that was like literally, we had no clue, right? We had no clue, but we were figuring it out. And then
That's
that day we did a demo and we just kept selling product. We brought a ton of it with us. We sold and we sold and we sold. And after that first day, we came back the next day and we're like, how'd we do? He's, you guys sold 400 bottles yesterday. And we're like, is that good? Is that bad? He's like, that's more coffee than I've ever sold in a month at this store. And people weren't buying it because the product was good, by the way. They're buying it because we were there begging and selling them more on this vision of like what coffee could be, not necessarily what was in the bottle at that point in time.
How'd you come up with Superfood name?
Yeah, so super coffee. Initially, it was a description, right? Like, this is what this coffee does for you. This is coffee plus benefits, coffee plus function. We knew that early on it had to taste good. You know, it couldn't just be function. And so we combined flavor with function, and we described it as super coffee. And because it's merely descriptive, you couldn't own the trademark. But after the first 3 years of business, our brand became so recognizable from sales and marketing materials that the USPTO actually granted us the trademark. So now the brand name is Super Coffee.
Right. That's cool. So you kind of like bumbled your way to success. What were some of the most interesting challenges? Like, oh shit, we're not sure the business is going to survive after this moment type challenges that you had in the early years?
Yeah, I mean, beverage is such a low margin, high volume game. And we didn't realize, but high volume is like $100 million in sales, you know, like, and we're
in order to make it to squeak out a profit, right?
Right. Totally. Yeah. So for going from that one store where we were doing $1,000 a week in sales, we're like, how are we going to do 100 million of this? And I think that thought of like looking up at the top of the mountain saying, how the hell are we going to get there was always overwhelming. But how do you climb a mountain one step at a time? You know, and every year we'd chip away. We started out, we did $1 million in sales, then 5 million the next year, 26 million the next year. Nice. We went on Shark Tank, you know, and like all of these things sort of compiled, and then you look up and you're like kind of halfway up that mountain. So I think slow and steady, I guess to answer your question, it was like, how are we going to get there? And there is no silver bullet. You know, you can't take a helicopter to the top of the mountain. You have to do the work to really get up there. And once we accepted that like it's a simple business, it's just a grind, we put our heads down and we've grinded for the last 6 years.
Right. Why didn't the Shark Tank invest? Why did they pass on you guys?
Well, they said, so we were at the time, it was 2017. We did about $1 million in revenue. We were asking for $1 million investment for 10% of the company. So $10 million
valuation. Yeah.
Yeah. And what they said, I mean, Mark Cuban was like, look, guys, I love you, love the energy. This might work, but there's a graveyard of billions of dollars of investments that have gone into beverages that never worked out. And I'm not prepared to be the guy who writes that next check, you know? So, I mean, it was, they liked the product. They liked the proposition. They didn't like the odds. They were like, you guys.
Well, and the odds, you know, with 3 20-something-year-old kids who've never built a business.
Right. Totally.
Yeah, exactly.
You can see them going, I don't know about this one.
Yeah, exactly.
They didn't realize how tenacious you were.
Right.
Yeah, that's the X factor.
Yeah. Talk about the role of mentors in helping you. You know, I imagine you built a board and had advisors early on. Who are some like pivotal mentors who gave you like a key sage piece of advice that was instrumental in success?
Yeah. I think this has been critical for us, and highly advise any entrepreneur starting out to surround yourself with the best possible people for the lowest possible cost out of the gate. We happen to be very lucky, and it was strategic on our part, but Seth Goldman, he was the founder of Honest Tea. So very similar. He basically did to Snapple in the late 90s what we were trying to do to Starbucks in the mid 2015. And he was actually based right about 20 minutes north of Georgetown University, where we were launching the business. So I reached out to Seth. We got an introduction through somebody at Georgetown, and he responded immediately. And he said, "Hey guys, this is amazing what you're doing. I love this. How about you start by reading my book?" And he had wrote a book about a story called Mission in a Bottle. Of course, we read it cover to cover, probably 20 times. But we made a pact to ourselves that no matter what we could do going forward, we always wanted to give Seth an update. If Seth was speaking somewhere, we wanted to be there and hear him live. We wanted to wait for him like he was a celebrity afterward and talk to him, get on phone calls with him, and just ask him as many questions as possible. And what that ended up doing, one, Seth had a lot of respect for us, but he started opening up his network to us and people that helped him and gave back to him. And some of them looked at it as an opportunity. A lot of them were our first investors. Some of them are just friends today and advisors. Seth still to this day, we jump on the phone with him. He helps us out. We're at a spot now where he was when he sold Honest Tea to Coca-Cola.
Is that right?
So he's seen us, the same stages we followed that he took, which have worked well for us. And we try to do the same thing for entrepreneurs starting out. And we always say, hey, read this book first because it was incredibly helpful for us.
Oh, that's kind of cool. I like that. All right. Who else? Anybody else? You got to have more than one mentor.
Yeah. I think coaches along the way. There's a gentleman on our board called Tyler Ricks, and Tyler was a marketing executive at Pepsi, but then he also launched a couple startups: Bare Naked Granola, Plum Baby Food. And so he's got that rare big company experience and also like the scrappy startup vibe. And he's been instrumental in keeping us focused. Inch wide, mile deep is one of his key reminders to us. And what he means is like support where you can support. And I think a lot of young brands in the food and beverage space, especially, get tempted to say yes to a purchase order at Ralph's in California and Wegmans in New York and Publix down in Florida. And then before you know it, you're spread out all across the country without a concentration of loyal customers. And it's really hard to be successful in an industry that's dominated by Coke and Pepsi and Nestle that have these multi-million-dollar marketing budgets. So that advice from Tyler was always a humbling reminder to stay focused where we were.
Yeah. One more quick one. The mentor is less important, but his messages were always super, super helpful. A guy named Jerry Rita, he's one of our distributors, and he handles New York City and Long Island, the most competitive beverage geo in the country.
Right.
And Jerry is, been the COO there for 30 years. He's a multimillionaire. He built brands like Vitamin Water and you name it, all this Monster, tons of successful billion-dollar exits. And one thing that Jerry taught us is the idea of you compete the same way you competed when you played football. And you got to want to win the same way you wanted to win when you were playing sports growing up. And all the big flashy stuff and the brilliant words of Jerry Rita doesn't fucking matter. You got to go out and got to want it more than the people that you compete with every day. Because there's only so much shelf space. The consumer's only buying so many items. And you got to be there at the point of purchase, physically wanting it more than the other folks that want to be on those shelves, which is a really good guiding light for an entrepreneur, because there is a time where you go from being on the grounds and the ones that are stacking shelves to taking on some investors' money and making decisions of how to spend that money. And the answer, and what Jerry would always say, is spend it as close to the customer and in those four walls of the grocery store as possible. And that was a really good guiding light for us of, be there, compete, and never forget about your customer at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And that is certainly wise advice.
Yeah, that one's critical, Mark, too. And I'll just say, like, make sure, we wanted to make sure we were talking to believable people in the space, people who had success time and time again. And when we talked to as many people as we possibly could, we saw the patterns emerge, right? All the smart, successful people had the same type of patterns in the industry, and those patterns became our guardrails or our roadmap. And we knew that we were going to put in the work. We knew we were going to do everything that it took, but with those guardrails, then we could be successful. But again, we weren't just taking advice from anybody, right? It had to be people who had that experience, who achieved what we wanted to achieve. And that was critical for us on our journey.
Yeah. That's cool. Now, multi-billion-dollar entrenched competitors don't love it when they see, an upstart like Super Coffee come along and they can, pull some kind of dick maneuvers. What's the worst thing that happened to you from one of your competitors to try to thwart your progress?
So this one just happened recently. So I don't know if this is the worst one, but it pisses me off. We're only sold in America right now. We got a lot to focus on here in the U.S., but obviously internationally, Super Coffee could be a massive company, and that's our aspiration over the next 3 to 5 years. Our lawyer reached out to us a couple of weeks ago and said, "Hey, we don't have the Super Coffee trademark in Canada. Somebody just applied for it." I'm like, "Oh, great! Somebody's trying to rip us off." And come to find out, it's Monster Energy. Monster
Get out of here
for the Super Coffee trademark in every country that we're not in. And their whole MO is once we're ready to launch in Canada, they're going to license our name back to us. It's
get out of here.
It's bullshit, man. It's such a racket, and they're known to do that. So, I mean, obviously we're challenging everything, but it's nice to have copycats. It's kind of flattering.
Yeah, That's an extreme
That's
example.
not a copycat, Jim. That's just a dick maneuver. You know what I mean?
That's a dick maneuver, like you said, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
what?
you see it all the time though. Like for us, shelf space is the most precious thing, right? Like
Right.
we're bought in retail, and you go in and you have the petty beverage fights where you go in 1 week, you're selling great, and you come back the following week, and Mark's Super Coffee gave them free product to take your space.
Right.
That happens time and time again. So that's just like a daily battle that our team
Yeah, I
fights.
bet. Interesting. So, have all the big brands introduced kind of knockoffs?
No, I mean nothing directly, which is honestly
No.
surprising. Some
Yeah.
people are still like until Super Coffee, bottled coffee was just coffee with milk and sugar. That's what
Right.
Starbucks is. That's what Dunkin' is. And brands are continuing to innovate with coffee with milk and sugar. Some brand you'll see a bunch of function starting to arise. Plant-based is a big trend with things like oat milk.
Right.
People are putting adaptogenic ingredients into coffee, CBD in coffee in some cases. But for us, we want it to be functional and flavorful in a way that appeals to the masses. We say it all the time. We're building a brand more for Walmart than for Whole Foods. I think you see a lot of niche brands going to Whole Foods that are great stuff that I love. The bulletproof coffees of the world, the Rebel coffees with the roots and the mushrooms and things like that. But it just doesn't appeal to the mainstream customer who's buying their groceries at Walmart in the middle of the country.
Right.
Bang Energy did launch an exact replica of our products, though, called Bang Keto Coffee.
Yeah.
Who is?
Bang Energy, that crazy
I know
CEO,
that.
Jack Owak. That was one that was a direct ripoff of the Super Coffee brand.
Who's behind that again? Bang?
A guy named Jack Owak, man, you got to
I've heard of
follow
him.
him on Instagram. Just go to Bang CEO. It is a riot to watch that.
Are you positioning? I mean, I probably should know this because it sounds like you keep talking about coffee, but you could position as a coffee drink, you could position as an energy drink or a protein drink because you're all three. So how do you deal with that kind of category confusion?
Right. I mean, it's part of our value proposition too, right? I think we saw these categories merging, 6 years ago, and now, it was an assumption that would continue to happen. People want more multifunctional products in their portfolio because, to Jake's point, before Super Coffee, people were leaving their workouts. They would have a protein shake in their right hand, a coffee in their left hand, or an energy drink in their left hand. We wanted to just make it more convenient and taste better at an affordable price point. So when we look at the data today, we are truly solving that problem and that need for customers at a mainstream level. And we want to continue to do that. But simultaneously, we also want to expand too beyond just our core Super Coffee product line, right? We want to play in adjacent categories like energy drinks, like pods and grounds, so people can make their own at home. We have creamers now, which are sugar-free and enhanced with protein. So we want to give people more consumption occasions, meet them where they are, versus just trying to give them a one-size-fits-all product and expect them to only drink that. So we have evolved the portfolio quite a bit, but our core Super Coffee, the one that started in the dorm room, is our most beloved product because it addresses the most problems and needs for our customers.
That's cool. So for aspiring entrepreneurs listening to this, what was, as succinctly as you can, what was the hardest part about going from 0 to 5 million, then the hardest part from going from 5 to 50 million, and then the hardest part from going to 50 to 500 million in value? Well, I don't know what your revenue is today, but I know your valuation's around 500. So what, over 100 million, I should say, probably.
You want to tackle one each?
Sure.
You were the dorm room guy.
Yeah, I think the hardest part about what we like to say, I was a Peter Thiel fellow, zero to A, is literally just breaking through and getting off the ground. And a lot of that is really hard manual labor. You can't pay your employees.
Like boots on the ground. You're out there talking to people, showing them the product. Yeah.
Yep. You don't have any resources or any capital. You got to figure out a way to make an MVP product, a minimum viable product, to get feedback on, to get revenue in the door, to raise capital. And then you got to go out and build your business really just with your own blood, sweat, and tears. And that's how you get to 5 million. That is how you get to 5 million in sales. There's no silver bullet there. It's 20-hour work days. We're doing our own manufacturing, distribution, and sales and marketing. And that's how we learned the business.
Yeah. I would say 5 to 50 is momentum. It's, hey guys, we're onto something. It's working in these small geographies. With your money, we can do this on a national level. And we need that fuel to keep growing. Time is of the essence.
So it's raising money and using that money in sales, marketing, and distribution.
Scaling what's working. Yeah. Building out the
Scaling.
team. Exactly.
Yeah.
Building out distribution. What do you think? 50 to 5?
I want to come back to that, by the way, Jimmy, and just talk about the perils and pitfalls of raising money, for a consumer product business. But all right, go ahead. Yeah, let's see.
Yeah, I would say the 50 to 500 is all about investing in your people.
Okay.
And
Wow.
building a great team.
Right.
And it's a big shift, because you go from being the doers to being the leaders.
Right.
And rather than taking care of the business needs every day, you need to take care of your people so that they can take care of the business. I think that is a huge shift, and probably where a lot of entrepreneurs probably make the mistake and never take that step to being a national brand and going beyond that, because they can't get their head out of focusing on how can I contribute versus how can I create a culture that allows others to contribute.
Yeah, and so I'm curious because you're absolutely right. By the way, excellent job kind of summarizing what the key challenges are for those different stages of growth. I mean, man, you just nailed it. But coming back to this culture, like that is hard work too. And so what strategies or support did you guys leverage to learn how, or are you leveraging to learn how to really build an outstanding culture so that everyone wakes up every day fired up to be part of Super Coffee and to meet your mission?
Yeah. So I think the important thing, right, is culture happens, if it's intentional or not, culture happens. And
That's
usually
right.
It starts as an extension of the founders. So really an extension, we joke, from our parents, right, and our childhood and who we are.
Right.
But then at a certain point, Jake mentioned it, you start building that team, you better get intentional about your culture. You better start defining it, how you want to be when you grow up, right? So we like to think of, our culture as our collective personality as a company. And we set some pretty clear guardrails, what our purpose is, what our mission is, what our vision is, what our values are. And our values actually are probably our claim to fame internally, which we call our coach values, funny enough. And they stand for curiosity, optimism, ambition, compassion, and humility.
Nice.
And everybody needs to live up to those values, and we need to hold each other accountable to those values. So yes, I think that, you have to be clear about it, but you also need to be really disciplined and stern about it too, with your hiring practices, really, because you're trying to hire great people who are already a great culture fit and then make them better. And then also, if you do have bad hires, which everybody does, you need to act quickly and get them out of the organization as well. So protecting the culture is critical. So once you set those guardrails and boundaries, one, as leaders, you need to model them every day. They need to be real. They need to be authentic. You can't just put the values up on the wall, right? You got to model them, but then you need to enforce them. And again, we like to give our people the benefit of the doubt, but we really model the servant leadership style where we're serving people first and helping them grow and evolve as people.
Yeah. Well, not only enforce, but to reward. So what are some of the things that you do to reward adherence to the coach values? By the way, I love those values. It was really well done. And I love that you said that values can't just be a plaque on the wall. They've got to be lived and habituated and to be essentially like virtues that everyone embodies. But so how do you reward that kind of behavior?
Totally, especially in a remote culture, right? You have to be crystal clear on those values.
Right.
And the nice thing is when you are clear about those values, you attract people who believe in the same things that you do, which is exciting. And for us, how we reward it, each quarter, every manager is responsible for conducting quarterly performance reviews, and every direct report is measured against one of those values. How did this coach display the value of curiosity in the prior quarter? Optimism, ambition, compassion. And for the most part, those are table stakes, right? If you're not exhibiting those values in your day-to-day life, this is probably not the place for you to begin with. But providing that coaching along the way, saying, hey, you're doing great here, and you can be doing a better leader here, right? Your optimism's awesome, but your humility, you took credit for something you should have passed on to. So I think not only rewarding that, but also we have shining stars. And just last week, we flew in our 2021 coaches of the year into our headquarters in Austin. We had guest speakers, we had workouts, we did cold plunges, nice. And that was 20 people from our 150 person full-time team that got to come and experience that.
Right.
Yeah. And that's the big stuff, right? The quarterly reviews, frequent feedback, and then the big rewards. I think the stuff that we do on a day-to-day basis, we accidentally leaned into before we even had coach, which is every team call we have, we reserve the last 5 to 10 minutes for gratitude. And gratitude is just shout outs for one another. Right. Mark had a kick-ass podcast today.
Yeah.
Jordan did an awesome job giving Jim a shout out. And typically that gratitude at the end, a lot of time it's giving folks a shout out that scored the basket or had an assist. But a lot of time it's like, hey, I got a coach shout out because Jordan did an awesome job exemplifying the H in coach. And he actually gave a shout out to the operations manager, even though he was the one that had a great meeting with our supply chain team. So I think that gratitude ingrained into our culture is something that has fed, those coach values and recognition. And also the feedback piece, to Jim's point, is super important part of the cycle.
I love it. And gratitude is a force multiplier. It creates such a cohesive, positive environment. The fact that you build that into your team meetings is really powerful. Good job on that. Well, you guys should take the coach model and write a book. What do you think?
That'd be awesome, man. Yeah,
we'll have to
learn from you.
Yeah,
coach
man.
Code.
We love it.
That'd be a great title too. Or maybe wait for 10 years so people take you seriously.
Exactly. The book's still being written.
It's being written. That's right. You don't want to write it before it's time. It's got to be seasoned.
Yeah.
So what is your vision? Because you could sell the company tomorrow. And do you guys have an ESOP where employees have a part of the upside?
Yes, sir. Every single one of our employees is an owner, and that incentivizes
awesome.
Teamwork rather than individual contributors.
Right. So what's the vision? You're not waiting to flip this thing. Obviously, you got a big vision.
Yeah, I think we saw a little problem in our lives, which is actually a big problem. That's America's food system. America's food paradigm is broken. There's too much sugar. There's too many calories in the food products that we consume by the masses, and we think that food doesn't have to be bad for you to taste good, right? We think food can taste good. Food and beverages can taste good and be good for you, right? It's flavor and function, like we said a minute ago. And with that, we want to be on the beginning of inspiring other entrepreneurs and other brands to do this in their categories, and not just in America, but then take it internationally. Like I said, we're only in the U.S. today. The next 5 years, we plan to expand globally and continue to make that impact on more people.
That's awesome. So you're going to hang on and build $1 billion brand and multi-billion dollar brand and change a lot of people's lives in the process. I couldn't believe that the FDA would not change their sugar recommendations last year after, literally everybody saying, guys, this is not healthy. We're hurting our culture, and they wouldn't change it.
Totally. Well, what's crazy about it is that a Starbucks Frappuccino, is more sugar in one Frappuccino than an adult man should consume in a day. And people are drinking it. They're drinking 2 or 3 of them. It's crazy.
Right.
It is crazy. They did the sugar tax in a lot of cities. They tried to institute that, but it turned into a sweet tax. So any brands that were using, so we're zero sugar. And based on some of our sweeteners like monk fruit, we at zero sugar, no artificial sweeteners, we're getting drilled for the same amount of sugar tax as Fanta soda. Yeah. Even though that we were zero and nothing artificial. So it just shows how big sugar has their hands all over the legislation.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, it's education, and the more people that get educated, then they vote with their mouths. You know what I mean?
That's right. Exactly.
And that's how it's going to change. You can't, I've said this a lot of times, but I'm big on changing people's mindsets and just through scaling consciousness and awareness and people making better decisions. You're doing it through a product and through your educational campaigns. I'm doing it through this podcast, my books, and my training programs. But I think we're at the cusp, and it's an exciting time to be in business and to be alive, because we're at the cusp of scaling awareness around healthy living, the importance of being positive instead of supposed to be negative, the importance of being inclusive and connecting, and to appreciate the sameness in all of humanity as opposed to being separate and violent, right? And so I think we're at a place, I don't know if you guys agree, where people are kind of fed up with that bullshit.
Yeah.
Because we know that humans are better. We've got more to give, and we can live on like a human paradise if we just choose to, if enough people choose to.
Yeah.
Totally,
Yeah.
totally.
And Mark, you nailed it, man. Like you're a part of this solution, right? You're doing the work on this podcast, sharing that consciousness. And I think to your point, now is an exciting time more than ever because this media, this education is available for free.
That's right.
It's on people's phones. It's on Instagram. It's on social media.
It's everywhere. Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Amy and I were laughing. Like when we went to Colgate, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have computers. We didn't have phones. We had nothing except each other. You know what I mean? We're like, so we spent a lot of time outside, spent a lot of time playing sports, and we were no different than you guys. We just didn't have access to all the information all the time at our fingertips. And so, you had to build a business mano a mano, one person at a time. Now you can reach millions of people through social media and through different campaigns. So it's extraordinary. And to build a business like you have in how many years? 6 years?
6 years. Yeah. Still building.
That's insane, right? It's really cool to see the ability to build a unicorn like that in 3 to 10 years.
Right.
Yeah.
So great work, man. I'm so inspired by you guys. And I know you're going to just continue doing it. And the fact that you're working together in harmony as brothers, what a great role model that is for families and for brothers. Now, are you guys married and kids at all yet, or are you too busy for that?
I got engaged. Yeah, I got engaged a few weeks ago, and
Congratulations.
I'm the most brave, I would say. In that regard.
That's pretty brave. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's cool. Jake's fiance has got to see us be a part of it. She was a part of this journey for the last couple of years, and
okay, good.
You understand the sacrifices that partners make in these situations, and it's family, it's teamwork, and I think that is honestly that's what makes this thing special is we have each other's backs whether this thing works or not.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, you're crushing it. So congratulations. And thank you so much for your time on this podcast. So it's really been a lot of fun and very interesting. And I think any people who are really interested in healthy living and love coffee and they haven't tried super coffee, they need to go out and get some. And also I love, your message and your desire to really educate people. So what's the best platform that you guys have for the educational piece or, for how people can engage with some of your cause marketing and whatnot?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is probably the most educational. We're often sharing PR and press around the battle against sugar. We're starting an organization. It's called an Alliance to Control Excessive Sugar, where it's brands like us. The acronym is going to be ACEs. Right. 7 brands in this inaugural launch. We're launching that tomorrow, actually. Which together we're removing over 10 million pounds of sugar from America's diet this month. Nice. So yeah, I think LinkedIn is probably the most shareable, and then Instagram for a bit more fun content.
Okay. And what about, do you guys do any personal engagement? If anyone want to reach out, let's say an attractive woman wanted to reach out to you.
Instagram as well.
That's awesome.
Instagram, and it's a good place for us to connect with folks too. I think DMs on Instagram have honestly become a place where you can build community, and it's just there on our phone so much. It's not like an email that goes into the inbox. We all tend to see your Instagram notifications, right? So we're all on Instagram, first name, last name. Would love to connect with your audience.
That's awesome. All right, guys. Once again, thanks very much. I appreciate your time. Keep doing what you're doing, and I'll be looking out for you.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Mark.
Hoo-yah.